I wanted to introduce you as Stephen Manchester because I can hear a little bit of the New England and yeah, I like it.
Yeah, there's definitely some New England here. So it's a little bit of mix of Boston and New York, right? So
Oh, I love it. I love it. You know, it's
yeah,
a rainy day here in Florida where I am, so you'll have to bring some sunshine from the Northeast for me. So before we get to Dad the novel, I want to talk about your accomplished writing career here, Steve. You have four number one bestsellers, 12 Months, The Rocking Chairs, Pressed Pennies, Gooseberry Island, a number of other novels out for mass production. So it's such a pleasure to welcome you in. And now this new book that's going to be able to be shipped in mid-September called Dad, a Novel. So I always give the authors that come on a chance. Give me your quick elevator speech about what this is about versus the other.
yeah. Well, I appreciate it. So Data Novel has probably been in the works for, I would say, most of my life. And I don't mean to be cliche about that, but I paid really close attention to my grandfather, my father. I have nothing but gratitude for what they gave me. And then 2 years ago, my dad passed. And as tragic as that was, it was a blessing to be with him. And all I felt toward the end, beside the grief, was gratitude. And I remember walking out of the hospital thinking, what's really important, right? And it all came back to my children, right? So it's that legacy that's passed, from one to the next. So you think, all these other things are important, and really, when push comes to shove, it's all about family and the people that you love. So I ended up talking to my publisher, Lou Aronica, who's fantastic, and we decided that it might be best to go forward because I write books that evoke emotion, right? So basically, I write male perspective to a female audience. I write tearjerkers, and unless I can evoke that emotion, it's not worth me putting pen to paper. So I started on Dad, three generations of fathers at different stages in their lives and how they impact each other's, and they come to these crossroads. You have the old man who's retired, finds out that he's suffering from a terminal illness. His grandson, at 19, is kind of limping through adolescence, getting into adulthood, and finds out he's going to be a new dad. And then the guy in the middle, who's obviously suffering this typical midlife crisis, needs to be there for both those men, right? Both his father and his son. So for me, honestly, Tobin, it was about taking the curtain, peeling it back a little bit. I watched my wife and my mom and my daughters and my daughters and my sisters, and it's a mystery to me, right? And I have to think at some level, the relationships that we have are a mystery to them, right? So for me, it was, just giving a little bit of insight to say, a lot of men won't say I love you, but they'll show you, right? And a father's expectation for his son may be different because he's trying to, train this guy, right, to be able to stand up in the world, right? So just trying to explain some of that and some of the mechanics around the relationships and the complexity of it made it all worthwhile for me.
Yeah, I agree. The complexity of the storytelling for me, and what I'll get into when I write it down, when I get pen to paper on the review, is to write about three dads at all different stages. So expectant dad who has no idea what they're doing, kind of
Right,
middle-aged dad who probably feels pretty seasoned and almost calloused by fatherhood over the last, couple of decades. And then
right.
lastly would be the father sort of looking back, almost delivering his own eulogy over time, and to write that simultaneous story, not only to tell their story but weave it together, that had to be pretty challenging, right?
Yeah, it was because it's layered, right? So the complexities are there. But I think what happens is, you have, I look at, when my first son was born, right? My father was very different to my son than what he was to me, right? And my son viewed him in a very different light. So it's almost like, oh, the old man walks on water. But for me, he was a little more heavy-handed, right? So he was, kind of showing me and my brothers how to step up and be what he considered to be men, right? So it's trying to explain that, but then, adding to it, right? So within the book, as Oliver, he's a little bit light on his son, with a grandfather doesn't hold back, right? So you have all those, again, those layers. And when you storyboard something like that, it's really about point of view, right? So as long as I stay in the right point of view, as long as I'm in the kid's head, which is probably the toughest part for me to write because I'm a little bit further from that. And then you get into the midlife, I'm there, right? So that's I won't say it's an easy write, but it's something that's right in front of me. And then I watched my dad recently go through what Robert went through in the book. So very complex, but again, as long as I keep those POVs, those points of view in line, then we can get it done.
Great. This is again Stephen Manchester, the author of his latest, or the name of his latest book is called Dad: A Novel. You'll be able to get it on Amazon for pre-order now, and it'll be delivered in September. I'll tell you what. So the one thing after I closed it last night, I read some of the press materials, and I was caught off guard. Something you actually alluded to earlier, a couple minutes ago, was the way you write is a male voice that females can relate to, or
Right.
because of the emotion. What do you think females can learn? When I closed the book, I thought, oh, this is a book for me. It's this middle-aged guy. He's
Right.
exactly at the point in life I'm at. It's I can see what I'll be, and I'll see what I was, and I'll figure it out. But then I was surprised that you said, hey, females can probably learn something from this as well. Moms, grandmas, people who think males are a mystery. What do you think they can learn?
I think it's kind of strange, right? Because I served in the first Gulf War. I worked in law enforcement for years. I was an investigator in a prison. And I consider myself an empath, right? So, even when I write a female character, for me, it's like, can I put myself in that person's shoes, right? At a human level. So with that, a novel, I wanted to really break it down to a human level. So if a woman, looks at her father and doesn't understand some of the things he's said and done, right? I'm hoping that not that we're going to explain it, but it gives you again some insight behind that curtain to say, there's certain roles that we play, there's certain stereotypes. I raise my daughter, she falls, she starts crying, I hug her, my son falls, I'm like, knock it off, stop crying, right? Like,
Yep.
be a man type of thing. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's exactly, the way that it's gone down. So for me, that a novel was not just for men. And my hope is that, a lot of men will read this and be able to share that with their fathers or their sons, but also for a woman who has a son or wants to better understand her husband or even her dad.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, obviously, the connection to the similar points in life that you and I both are. You have 4 kids. I have 5 kids. We're in the
Right.
midst of doing that and raising good humans. The other thing I took note of that I wanted to get your perspective on, which is something that I didn't particularly appreciate, or I'm not sure I don't agree. It's not about agreeing with, but I'm not sure I'm there yet. Is this notion that that Oliver brings up, that when he's talking to his son about expecting a kid, and he says, hey, the hardest part is when your kids are, I'm paraphrasing, of course, start to grow up and don't need you, and you're not the caregiver. And
Right.
maybe I just haven't reached that point yet, but I thought, oh my God, that's the hardest part. I thought the stuff I was going through now was hard. It's
Right.
kind of intimidating.
Yeah, again, it's just about stages of phases, right? And I think, like when I served in the first Gulf War, it was a brutal experience, and I promised myself I was going to come home, chase the dream down, become a published author. But all of my books have this underlying thread, which is, we're never alone, right? So I believe that. So for that, a novel, I'm sure there are some men who think they're not getting it right, or I mean, there's no, as you know, there's no manual for this. What I have learned is, my wife and I have 4 children. 3 of them, I call it in the wind, right? But 2 of them are actually the third one just graduated as well, right, out of college. So they're all in the workforce. They're all doing their thing, and we're still incredibly close. But it's just a different dynamic, right? I don't think I'll ever be their friend, to say quote unquote a friend. They have plenty of friends, right? They need me as their dad, but it's very different. When they were smaller, it was everything, right? And then it becomes, okay, all I need now really is money and a ride. And then, hey, guess what? I just got my license and a job. And then my role changes to the point where it's like, oh my God, like, first and foremost, I'm in your corner. Whatever you need, it's going to happen, right? But now what do I do? Right? Now what do and I'm still adjusting to that, which is somewhat difficult because I look at my kids and they're still 6 years old. You know what I mean? To me.
Wow. I know, it's wild. I tell you what. So you've mentioned your father's situation as sort of the springboard, his passing a few years ago as the springboard to really want to get this story down on pen and paper. You had thought about it for a while through your experiences with
Right.
fatherhood. Did your dad get a chance to read any of the script? And
No, he didn't. But I got to tell you, and I'm not trying to be, like blow any smoke here, but I'm a very spiritual person. Like I felt very, very close to my father when I wrote this book, and in many respects, it's a thank you letter to him, right? So I feel nothing but gratitude. Even the stuff where when you're a kid and you grow up, like, oh, I can't wait till I get older, and I hate my father and this, that. And then you look at it now and you laugh because, and I'm sure my kids have felt the same way or thought the same way, but they don't realize that obviously their best interest is in mind, right? My best interest was in his mind. He did the best he could. He made his mistakes. He wasn't perfect, but he was perfect for me. And I hope my children someday can say the same, right? So again, a thank you letter to my dad. And I have to believe at a certain level or a much higher level, he was there with me when I was writing it.
Oh, that makes it an even better story and more compelling for people to read. I'll tell you that much. So let's wrap it up on this. This is Stephen Manchester. He's the author of Dad, a Novel, amongst many other books, a lot of them which are #1 bestsellers that you should pick up. So the last question I thought of is, do you regret not having read a book like this in previous years, or have written it in earlier years as a way of like self-education?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a cliche in the industry, Tobin, right? Where they say, write a book that you wish, that you'd like to read, right? So, I mean, I've read a lot of books, there's, that include dads, or and I didn't necessarily want this to be a self-help novel, but I wish I had read it years ago. So again, quote unquote, I didn't feel alone, right? There were many times where it's like, I'm not sure if I'm getting this right. I mean, I love my children more than my own soul, right? But, am I doing it the right way, right? Am I making, these huge mistakes where the kids are going to be in therapy years from now? And I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, but had I read a book like this, something similar to this, I think I would have felt much more at ease to say, if the decisions are made out of love, you know what I mean? And respect is an expectation. And if you remember in the book, the book is dedicated to any man who's been blessed with fatherhood, but especially those who went on to earn the title dad. And I think there's a huge difference between a father and a dad.
Yeah, I love that line, and I was going to bring it up in passing here, but let's wrap on this. So, Dad, a Novel, get your copy now. Amazon, everywhere. I'll post the link in my review.
Thank you.
I won't bury my story too much because I want you to check out what I think of the book in pen and paper. But I'll tell you what, your zest for fatherhood comes across in the characters that you portray, which I think is a huge win for an author.
Thank you.
And, more than anything I do, Stephen, I know you have a lot of things to do. You're trying to get this book promoted, and you took some time for us, so we really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It was my honor to be here, Tobin. Really, I appreciate your time.